How Africa can get rich again. Africa used to be a fantastic continent. Throughout the vast continent of Africa, numerous powerful kingdoms ruled on to the end of the Middle Ages. Around the world, the effects of numerous ancient African civilizations can still be felt in a variety of ways. It is true that the origin of Homo sapiens is thought to have occurred in what is now Ethiopia, making Africa the home of humanity. Even the brightest minds of today are in amazement of the engineering, scientific and mathematical achievements made by the ancient Egyptians some 7,000 years ago. In this video, we'll look at how Africa can get rich again in every aspect. But before we continue, please subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. As it concerns Africa, we can't look at the way forward without tracing back to history and knowing exactly what happened and how great Africa was before now. Some of the amazing legacies of ancient Egyptian history include the art of writing, pictograms, the enormous pyramids of Giza, the complex temples and tombs in Luxor, the mathematics of geometry and algebra, and the art and science of embalming. As academics and architects flocked into the kingdom, its capital grew into a hub of culture, trade, and architecture. A number of Arab scholars, including the poet and architect Al-Sahiri, were drawn to the University of Timbuktu in Mali, one of the first universities ever established. However, the impressive accomplishments of Africans in a variety of fields, such as science and engineering, were widespread across the continent. Before we continue, bear in mind that before colonization, Africa was great and rich. I know you may be confused at this point, but I want you to follow me to the end on how I uncover the truth you have never heard before. According to Harvard history professor Emmanuel Achiampong, off the coast of modern-day Tanzania was noted by an unnamed recorder on the journey of the Portuguese explorer Pedro Alvares Cabral in the year 1500. This island was small near the continental and is a beautiful country. Like in Spain, the houses are tall, which traders were found in this country, and there is an abundance of gold, silver, amber, musk, and pearls. Those of the land wear clothes of fine cotton and of silk, and many fine things, and they are black men. This is just the tip of what Africa was back then. Furthermore, University of Timbuktu, yet another sign of greatness and exceptional advances in pre-colonial Africa, was the ability of its leaders to move markets as illustrated during Mansa Musa's stopover in Cairo on his pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324. The Arab historian Shihab al-Umuri, who visited Cairo 12 years after King Mansa Musa, wrote, "Mansa Musa left no emir or holder of royal office without a gift or load of gold. He and his company gave out so much gold that they depressed its value 7 times in Egypt and caused the price to fail." Yes, actions taken by an African leader as far back as 14 centuries ago could depress the world price of gold. But today, actions taken by Africans no longer move major markets, even for the resources they control. The world price of gold and other precious metals and natural resources is set outside of Africa. It is therefore no wonder that Africa earns less than 10% of $120 billion global cocoa and chocolate market, despite the fact that it produces 75% of the world's cocoa beans, receives only 3% of the $3 trillion global petroleum products market, while accounting for 10% of the world's crude oil reserves, and receives 4% of the over $300 billion global gold earnings, despite accounting for 50% of the world's gold production. Africa has natural resources like other continents. However, Africa is the least developed continent on Earth. The history of Africa shows that it was once prosperous. Africa was great before, and therefore it can be great again. The question now is how? Which takes us to the main pertinent issue now. As a region, Africa accounts for around 20% of US aid, with Egypt, Kenya and South Sudan being the biggest beneficiaries. Although critics argue that lowered public international spending will adversely affect development projects, this reduction should also be seen as an opportunity for the continent to rise and for the relationship between the US and Africa to evolve. Africans must identify priorities, define and implement them, not being reactionary to the politics of the West. Will reducing foreign assistance be a good act or mistake to Africa? African countries have been recipients of foreign assistance since their independence. It is undeniable that some US development assistance programs, especially the people and country-centered ones, such as the Millennium Challenge Corporation and the Africa Development Foundation, have shown lasting results in programs that stimulate local economies and reduce aid dependency, such as sustainable agriculture, youth entrepreneurship, and improved access to power. Despite these successes, many experts argue that the provision of foreign assistance has at times developed a culture of dependency in Africa and fostered authoritarianism as opposed to partnership by the US and elsewhere. Thus, African governments need to take this opportunity to scale up policies that outgrow democracy, creating the enabling environment to build prosperity in Africa through concrete priorities such as job creation, regional integration, and economic engagement. The following points should be the top priorities measures that the government of the various African countries should implement. 1. Job creation. More than 200 million people in Africa, which has the youngest population in the world, are between the ages of 15 and 24. According to the African Development Bank, doubling by 2045, governments must develop policies and implementation plans that will enable a more competitive private sector that supports business growth, job creation, and the stimulation of African economies, such as sound fiscal and monetary policies, good governance, transparency, and strengthened judicial systems, an improved investment climate, and reduced corruption. This is necessary given that the continent will need to create 74 million jobs by 2025. Long-term investment in the private sector, manufacturing, infrastructure, and agriculture will specifically address food insecurity and provide African youth with the necessary employment opportunities. Increasing incentives to raise educational standards will be essential for creating a skilled workforce. Regional integration. In order to sustain development and promote long-term prosperity for the entire African region, African governments should work to strengthen regional integration initiatives as they move away from relying on Western aid. In order to accelerate economic growth, increasing intra-African trade will be essential because it will boost industry competition, increase productivity, and build local infrastructure. This will mark a turning point in Africa's development. According to the World Trade Organization, trade between African states currently only accounts for 12% of total trade, while it accounts for 60% of trade in Europe, 40% of trade in North America, and 30% of trade in the Association of the Southeast Asian Nations, respectively. However, the Continental Free Trade Area would create the biggest single market in the world and essentially increase trade between African countries by 50%. Intra-African trade and deeper market integration will significantly boost economic growth, employment, job creation, poverty reduction, the inflow of foreign direct investment, industrial development, and the better integration of the continent into the global economy when combined with good governance and political stability. Additionally, it will lessen the continent's current high reliance on external factors for its development. Taking a step back, this pendulum punch has been as refreshing as it has been uplifting for a continent that had misery and destitution as its key tropes. However, it is also true that poverty has remained widespread. Between 1990 and 2010, the number of people in poverty increased from 289 million to more than 413 million, compromising the prospect of meeting the first era's development goal of eradicating extreme poverty. Perhaps surprisingly, social media and the widespread use of mobile phones are hastening economic development in Africa. Across the continent, mobile telephony has already sparked innovation in the banking industry. However, the story of Africa's rise is complicated because it goes beyond economics. Academics and professionals moved from Africa to the West during the 1980s and 90s, causing a brain drain. With the rise of African transnationals and initiatives that enable Africans who live outside the continent to contribute to its development, the emphasis has now shifted to brain circulation. The development of educational institutions is essential for Africa's future. Also, the frustration of social aspirations is also evident in the thousands of Africans who attempt the dangerous Mediterranean journey to Europe, convinced that the brighter future lies beyond the continent. The rise of a prosperous Africa will ultimately be based on the emergence of an assured African, confident in knowledge and identity at home in Africa and the world at large. It was this spirit that surprised the Portuguese visitors to Kilwa in the 1500s when they came to Africa. The good news is that African political leaders decided to advance the continent's economic integration through the African Continental Free Trade Area last year. A borderless Africa would create the groundwork for a workable continental market, spur economic growth, and make Africa more competitive in international trade and value chains, as the African Development Bank correctly notes. Additionally, it would enable cross-border industry development, giving investors access to economies of scale as they consider more integrated markets. It is very regrettable. At 18%, intra-regional trade in Africa is currently the lowest in the world, trailing only by 70% in Europe, 55% in North America, 45% in Asia, and 35% in Latin America. The current 18% figure could more than double within the first 10 years of the Free Trade Agreement's implementation, according to the African Export-Import Bank. One of the main topics up for discussion at the World Economic Forum on Africa will be supporting growth and integration through the African Continental Free Trade Area, because trade is essential to development. Africa's working age population is projected to increase from 705 million in 2018 to almost 1 billion by 2030. As millions of young people join the labor market, the pressure to provide quality jobs will escalate. Africa's labor market is dominated by the informal sector, which is a default option for a large majority of the unemployed youth and women. A working age population that is educated and good in health is essential for long-term, inclusive economic success. It improves people's quality of life and sense of worth. I tend to agree with the World Bank's assessment that children receiving a high-quality education and having adequate health conditions are excellent predictors of an economy's future growth. Higher education spending does not, however, always equate to better results. Senegal, for instance, has high levels of learning relative to its income and spending levels, whereas South Africa's educational outcomes are poor despite higher expenditures. It is obvious that the options that come out of your discussions in Cape Town should ensure the best learning outcomes across the continent. Putting emphasis on initiatives that foster lifelong learning and continuous upgrading of skills are also important for the continent to be a meaningful economic partner in the fourth industrial revolution. For example, Singapore offers training grants to all adults throughout their working lives, and the Netherlands offers tax reductions for employee training. Conclusively, given weak global growth prospects and significant downside risks, our economic policies will need to strike a balance between supporting growth and creating the fiscal space to respond to emergent economic challenges. This means executing on fiscal consolidation now, particularly in highly indebted countries. The policy package we prescribe should balance growth, equity, and sustainability concerns, including protecting society's most vulnerable, particularly youth and women, who tend to be left behind during economic transformations. Tackling corruption decisively would also help raise additional resources and redirect them to growth-friendly areas while restoring the integrity of institutions. This would in turn spread economic benefits more widely within and across countries. This is a time to act boldly and swiftly to ensure we don't confine Africa's youth to the margins of global economic activity. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to our channel, give this video a thumbs up if you found it interesting, and let us know in the comments below your opinion on how Africa can get rich again.